Okay, so that was the first part of the character analysis, and we only did one quote. But as you guys know, you should have two pieces of evidence in your paragraph. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the second piece of evidence. So just as a review, we have our thesis. We had our very first quote. Instead of plopping it down there, we needed to set it up with the scene, the speaker, the situation. Then we integrated our quote, and then we had our elaboration. Now, since we're going on to the second piece of elaboration, we definitely want to make sure that we use a transition. So a transition could be another example. It could be next. It can be later. I'm going to use the transition word later. And this goes, so now I know that we're going to transition to another idea. So I want to use my second quote because it was crawling across my foot. But I can't just plop down and say later because it was crawling across my foot. I need to do the same thing that we did, which is set up the scene, the situation, and the speaker. So before I use my quote, I'm going to do that. All right, so later in the story, when the snake had slithered, just because I'm trying to get some good word choice, out of the room, and everyone was safe, a party guest asked how Mrs. Wynne knew about the cobra. All right, so this is later in the story. The snake's out of the room, and a party guest is asking her, how'd you know about the cobra? And she replied, so this is who's saying it. She replied, quotations, because it was crawling across my foot. Quotations, and then this was on page 2, so I do parentheses, parentheses, period 2. So as you can see right here, I've set it up. Then I have my actual quote integration. And what's the next thing I need to do? Well, I need to elaborate on how this quote shows courage. Okay, so this demonstrates her courage, spelling, because not only was the snake in the room, but it was actually touching her. She was still able to remain calm when most people would have reacted by jumping and screaming. That's certainly what I would do if I had a snake slithering off of my foot. So this demonstrates her courage because not only do we realize the snake was in the room, but it was actually touching her on her foot. She was able to remain calm when most people would have reacted by jumping and screaming. And then I'm just going to wrap it up by saying Miss Wynn was definitely the bravest character in the story. Okay, and that's just sort of my way of wrapping this up with a conclusion sentence. So for the second part, we're going to incorporate our next quote. We're going to use a transition. We're going to set up the scene, the speaker, the situation. We're going to use our quote that we pulled. Remember, we can't just plop it down there. Okay, we need to set it up. And then we need to really think about what does this show us? I really would not want to say this quote shows us that she was courageous. I really want to think a little bit deeper. And even when I start to put this together into my final draft, I may even want to be more insightful or more thoughtful about how that shows us pure courage. But this is an example of how you are going to take your two quotes and incorporate them into a character analysis paragraph. I will show you guys the final product when I have it all typed up, and then we'll review the rubric with it. Okay?